stream over on TikTok, and despite not even having a drawn sword, I got banned for like a few days. So that's where we're starting tonight. Let's see. Although that message is more for people who are going to watch the stream after the fact, because nobody's actually in here yet. So I'm talking now for you people in the future who will be watching a recording. What to do to fill the airtime until I start getting questions? I usually do these lives, these sort of like after work talk lives, where I'm just trying to field questions and do a little Q&A with, the stuff we got in the room. And look, we have people now. Hello. Hi. So yeah, this is just a after hours little Q&A, just killing some time. Figured I'd go live. Plus I got new swords, so it's always exciting to talk about those, especially if anybody has questions about that Cold Steel Man-at-Arms messer, because that video sort of took off. People really thinking it was way more, the reactions were way more mixed than I expected. Oh, hello, Frank Knox. Thanks for the donation. It's going pretty well. It's a Monday, but a Monday off of a holiday weekend, it's kind of hard to complain. And then we've got another holiday coming right back up. And this weekend, I'm going to the Carolina Renaissance Festival, so I'm pretty excited all around. Krieg, what about the Kriegsmesser? Howdy the cat. What does a blued blade mean? I would love to be able to show you, but I no longer have a blued blade. So this was blued. It is no longer blue. Do I have anything that... you'll get the idea. This used to be black. So bluing is a process by which you introduce an artificial, or not artificial, what am I saying? A controlled oxidization of steel. So you get, I probably have an example of bad rust around here, but we all know what bad rust is. That especially red rust, you really don't like red rust. But then, so there are a bunch of ways that that metal can become oxidized. And so when you get that like red and brown rust, that tends to be pretty not so good. You start to, the blade starts to decay. It flakes off and stuff. You don't want that. But if you can oxidize it in the process of bluing, you are rusting it in a way that is still good for the metal, and it won't sit there and like disintegrate. And in doing so, because it's oxidized, it's now less likely to oxidize. The metal that's exposed is now less likely to oxidize into the bad rust. So it's a way to protect the metal. But as far as I know, a messer like this would most likely not have a blued blade. A blued hilt, sure. I think the blued hilt would actually be completely appropriate on this. And I thought about leaving the hilt of this messer blued, but then curiosity got the better of me. I'm like, okay, like the blade looks good and the hilt looks okay, but what if I couldn't resist the temptation of knowing what the sword would look like if I took the bluing off of the entire thing. So I did it. I could not resist the curiosity, but I'm not really unhappy with the result. I think I keep sheathing it, but honestly, I think that looks fine. I like it. I'm probably going to do something about the handle. This was like a dark brown, and it looks really rich against the black. But now that the black's all gone, now the wood handle just looks like it's black. And I'm thinking about maybe trying to lighten that a little bit more, but I haven't made up my mind yet. Maybe I'll get the wife's opinion on it. Let's see here. What else do we have? Unfortunately, the chat functionality here is not the best for tracking this. When does a knife become a messer? So a knife is a messer, but let's say, when does a messer become a long messer? When does a knife seem long to you is kind of where I would mark that. So I have over here, I have a messer. This is a messer, the knife, right? So I have 3 different, I'm doing a video on this later. I have 3 different messers here that I can show. Right, so we have a proper messer, we have a long messer, so long knife, normal knife, long knife. Oh, that thing comes out of the scabbard so pretty. And we have a war knife. So war knife. So Kriegsmesser, war knife, long messer. There you go. You can kind of see the differences there. War knife, long knife. Knife. Now, I would say, as a rule of thumb, this is how I tend to think of the difference between a dagger and a sword, which I think you can do the same thing for thinking about a messer or a long messer. Is it longer? If you are holding it, is it longer than your forearm? Let me put that away. I have to manage my space here. So I would say that threshold is when so if I'm doing this, if it's longer, this is my personal measure, and I think it's a pretty good way biomechanically to think of things. If the blade is longer, when I'm holding it reversed like this, if it's longer than my elbow, then I think it's fair to call it a sword. And I would say anything that's elbow length or shorter becomes a dagger or a knife in this case. For example, here's a rondel dagger. You see? Elbow, it's a elbow length, which makes it a useful length for dagger. I don't know why I grabbed this dagger when I have a much prettier metal one over here. That's just on me. There. An actual metal rondel. Let's see. Somebody asked, you want to know about the Grossmesser? What about the Grossmesser? Let's see. People don't like cold steel. Historical accuracy, they say, is questionable. Yeah, I mean, cold steel operates on an idea of being close enough. And for the price point, I don't fault it. It's the $200 sword versus a $400 sword with that ball arms, right? It's I can't really fault them on that particular part. Yes, there is some historical precedent for blue blades, but they are few and far between and become more of a thing later on. And even then, they never get like super duper widespread. I would say when you see blued blades, outside of like maybe like the ricasso being blued, the actual like the working part of the blade, the cutting part of the blade being blued, it would be very uncommon, as far as I've seen. Not to say that it doesn't happen, but it's not the norm. Howdy, what makes the flambear so iconic? The wavy part, I guess. I mean, that is its namesake, is the flame blade. Are these swords sharp? Some of them are, some of them aren't. There is a fluffy thing on my nose. This is not sharp. This is blunt. That is not sharp. The messer is sharp. I would not do that to myself with the messer. Do I have any Zweihanders? I do indeed. This one I have to go up for. Oh, there we go. I do indeed have a Zweihander. Where's my wood block? There we go. This is my Zweihander, Montante specifically. But same general gist. Just depends on what language you're talking. Slight regional variation though. So this one is much more. The form factor here is very typical Montante. So I think that's why it's really a more appropriate name for it in this case. But it's still technically a Zweihander. It's a two-handed sword. So by definition. Okay, hello. Let's see. Frank Knox left a message of, I thought of getting a message from Long. Oh yeah, from Long Snack Emporium. I have handled uh, a blunt like sparring messer from there, and it's the best feeling sparring messer I've ever handled. It's fantastic. It blows my. I like my Fabri Armorum long messer for sparring, but it doesn't feel like a cutting sword. I'm just like slowly piling on swords here. Move my wood block. So right here, so this is my Fabri Armorum long messer, and although it's got the fuller in the back there, you can see, which is to give it a little bit more of a meat in the cut here, because obviously you can tell this is not in fact a curved sword by any means, but it is still meant to simulate the curved sword. So at the very least, they've given it a fuller, that gives it, if nothing else, a single-edged sword feel, but it doesn't feel like a cutting sword. It feels like a weird arming sword. It doesn't feel right. It's a good sword, and I like it as a, like, I don't have a one-handed arming sword, so I use this for anything that would call for an arming sword, because that's kind of how this feels. So it's a perfectly good sword for sparring, and it's got great flex too. I don't know if that's not going to show, but the flex on this is very safe. But it just lacks that chop that you really want. But again, that can be a safety concern too. If you have too much chop, it stops being quite so safe. But yeah, I would love to get that Langschnecht Emporium long messer sparring sword at some point. That would be a great acquisition. But I don't do enough with messers to really. I was about to put this Montante away, and I haven't even scrolled down to most recent comments to see if anyone was talking about it. Yes, we have migrated from TikTok. TikTok did not like the fact that, I think TikTok thought I was trying to sell swords. So when I got the hit with the temporary ban on TikTok, they said it was a dangerous weapons violation, which it could have been the fact that I was holding a sword, but at no point was I like brandishing a sharp sword. I was just standing there with my messer, the Kriegsmesser over there. I was just standing here with the messer like this. So I don't imagine it's from me brandishing it. So my best guess is when I started talking about how much I paid for the messer, is that thought I was trying to auction the sword off to the live, and I think that's where they tagged me. So I've appealed it, and hopefully that appeal will go through, because it's very unusual. Like, I can do lives on TikTok fine. I've done it fine for quite a while now without any violations. So I think it flagged because I started talking about money. And now we're right back to then the very next comment, shop recommendations. Yeah, it's a shop recommendation. Again, if YouTube moderation is watching this stream, I am not here selling swords. This is purely informative. But I personally like to buy swords from Cult of Athena when I'm buying sharp swords. I like their selection. I like the care that they take to curate their swords, their stock. For example, that Balor Arms Kriegsmesser that I was flaunting just a minute ago, this one right here, I waited a while for this thing to become available again. Even though they had some in stock, they had designated the ones that they had in stock as blemish grade, and I wanted an unblemished one because, why not? So, for example, yeah, like that, they will indicate for you if something is not up to snuff, and they will usually discount it. So you get a chance to get stuff for less than full price sometimes if you're willing to make up that difference. Do. What got me into swords in the first place? Great question. Oh, let's see. I bought this book specifically so that I could keep answering this question. Ugh. This book. This book is why I got into swords. The DK Eyewitness Knight book. This is specifically, and I can get even more specific than that. The thing that got me into swords was, I think I actually passed it. Well, there we go. Was this 2-page spread about arming a knight. So the reason why I got into swords was actually because I got into knights. So the sword wasn't actually it was what came first, the armor or the sword for me? It was the armor. So armor was my first love. And I honestly, I didn't care about this. Like the sword was just an accessory to the armor. I was all about the armor. And then in college, I got the opportunity to actually start practicing fencing. And then I started getting more into the swords. And now I still love the armor, but now I'm more of a sword guy. It's interesting how that goes. Although part of it is expense. It's much cheaper to buy swords than it is to buy armor. And it's much easier to use swords than to put on armor, let me tell you that. The fantasy of wearing armor is sometimes more fun than the actual process of wearing armor. But once you're in the armor, it's really cool, but it's a lot of hassle. Oh, good evening, Duragung. You want to see my kitchen? My kitchen's... I can't show them the... I've been told not to show the kitchen because it's dirty. It's not that dirty. It's lived. She is okay. For your sake, I will not show the kitchen. Reading the comments. Hello, everybody. I'm trying to read the. I sent in a support ticket thing to YouTube, being like, "Hey, I like the new format, the new vertical format, but I cannot. This text is so tiny. I have to be like, I'm not getting any younger to be like right here to read the chat. This is way too close. I don't think you all need to be that close to my face." There are rondelles that are more than... Yeah, rule of thumb on length. If it's longer, yeah, but I think it's just a good rule of thumb. I think that elbow length is a good measure. Would I ever get an English tuck or S-tuck? Yeah. It's not high on my priority list though, because there's just not a lot I can do with one of those. Like a sparring sword I can spar with, and a cutting sword I can cut with. But a S-stock I can stab with, but I can stab with either of the other swords. So it's kind of hard for me to... They don't interest me enough to get for their intrinsic value, and I can't really justify the purchase from a functional standpoint. So it's not likely I will get one anytime soon. But if I found myself drowning in money, sure. With very eye slits in the helms behind you, have much practicality, or was it more aesthetic? Yeah, there is a variety in functionality in the eye slits. The one you can barely see over here, which is for the best, is a fictitious helmet. It's inspired by the one from A Knight's Tale, I believe. So don't even look at that one. Just pretend this one isn't here. We have my closed sallet right here. It has just a single slit, much like the sallet up here. So they're kind of in the same family. You just get a single slit, but there is a gap underneath the helmet, but before you get to the neck protection. So it's this sort of overlap like this. And so when you're wearing the helmet, you can, because that bever goes right up against your face, like right there, and the visor comes down to about here. So there's actually a gap between the visor and the bever where you can see down So you actually have two slits of vision. You have the one across the brow or across the eyes, and you have the one under the nose, so you can look down between the two. So you can see more than it looks like you can. Uh, Again, similar boat here with the great helm. You have a split eye slits here, 1, 2, and then you have breaths, and the breaths are like first and foremost for like airflow, but also you can look through them. Here is a Morian helmet. It doesn't have a visor, so it completely uninterrupted field of view aside from the visor or the brim kind of coming up and over and kind of blocking some of the upper vision, but not overly important to have that. If someone was to make a medieval fantasy world, where would you say they would have to look to make historically accurate weapons? Museums? I mean, looking at museum, like online museum, um, it's good. So there's this, even then, museums can be tricky because like if you look at armor, a lot of museums will have composite armors, and they're doing the best that they can to assemble from like what limited extent examples we have. But then there's like survivorship bias and everything. Unfortunately, there's not really a single good answer. It depends on the level of depth you want to go into. I think if you just want to give it a fair shake, looking at museums is fine. Depending, if you're doing like living history levels authenticity, you're going to want to like dig into where those museum pieces came from and that kind of stuff, and you're going to want to start looking at effigies and all that fun stuff. So that's probably a more complicated project than you're looking, I'm guessing, trying to like make a game or write a story or something like that, and that's probably deeper into the weeds than you need to go. So I would say just keeping an eye on museum catalogs and keeping in mind the date range, because if you start skipping date ranges too far, things are going to start looking weird. One of the big mistakes people make is they start putting great helms onto like full plate harness. No, like, don't do that. Oh, and then they put a surcoat on it too. So you'll have a full plate harness with a surcoat and then a great helm. And it's this like really weird amalgamation of completely disparate technologies. Yeah, so I was talking earlier about how did I get started in sword fighting and collecting. So I started off my journey with that DK Eyewitness Nights book. And then in college, I got the opportunity to start defense, and I joined a HEMA club, which I'm still a part of. And now it's been almost 10 years. I've been doing that continually ever since. And then I started to pick up arms and armor when I started like kind of like getting into a career, but it didn't really start to explode, like big time explode, until I started doing the channel. Because when I kind of had this setup going when I started. I'd already bought most of my armor by then. I had these swords. I had a couple helmets. I had some. I had the start of it all, but the breadth that it has reached now is largely funded through the YouTube channel. And well, yeah, largely through the YouTube channel. TikTok does not pay you very well. No, this is my fencing club actually. The pen, John. Yes, Cold Steel has a good few trainers. I have like here's one right here. This is a Cold Steel dagger. I like the Cold Steel daggers a lot. Their swords, I have. They're a bit, from my experience, they were a bit stiff. I don't, worryingly stiff at times. What do I think of Regenier? I have a Regenier right here. I think Regenier is well situated as being the workhorse of the HEMA crowd. If you're just starting out, if you are trying to get your very first sword, Regenier is, you can't go wrong with a Regenier fetter. They just work. They're not pretty, but they work and they last. How many suits do I have? Complete suit. So a complete suit is a matching jacket and pants. So complete suits I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? No, 8. I believe 8 suits. And then jackets, I don't know. I'll be here too long trying to figure it out how many I have, because I have a lot that I don't really wear. I always go thrifting for a lot of my clothes. So if I see something that I kind of like, it's you know, like $10, so I'll pick it up, and then I may or may not wear it much after that point. I tend to kind of hoard jackets that fit, with the hope that maybe I'll eventually find something that I like how it mixes with. Is that a real musket in the back? Yes, that is a 17. It's not an original, but it's a reproduction 1717 French Army musket, also known as the the Charleville. There we go. Also known as the Charleville, and it was this musket that Benjamin Franklin brought a set of to help supply from France to help supply the revolutionary soldiers, and the Charleville. I keep thinking of the Chevalier sword that I have over there, but the Charleville was the musket that was used as the basis for the first Springfield Armory musket. So the very first U.S. musket, like the very first official U.S. firearm, was a copy of that musket, or not necessarily that one specifically, but one of the Charlevilles. I don't remember which year. 15 is the 1750s, 1771 or something. One of the models. If anyone else knows, feel free to fire off in the comments. But don't. What forge did that Zweihander come from? This is from Regenier as well. I don't know why I picked up the fetter when I had that right there. Yeah, I have 2 Regeniers here. Do I work for a museum? No, but I did do a little bit of museum stuff when I was in college. But I don't actively work for a museum. It would be fun, though. It was fun. I got to make an exhibit once. That was very exciting. I curated it. It was wonderful. What would be the historical differences between the Zweihander, the Flamberge, and the crisp blades? Okay, so that's actually a fun question. So I can try to like break this apart, because ultimately, they're all different. 2 of them are just totally different things, and then one of them can be I think a fair way to describe either one. So a Zweihander, it means two-hander, you know, two-hander. A Flamberge means flame blade, but a Flamberge is not necessarily a two-handed sword. A Flamberge, because it's a flame blade, so most, you know, known are the Flamberge two-handed swords. You know, it was a popular affectation, stylistic flavoring on these big old two-handed swords, because they're already expensive swords. So while you're at it, might as well make it look fancy. But it was not exclusively done to two-handed swords. There are some Flamberge rapiers, if that floats your boat. There we go. So that's establishes that part. The Chris is is sort of one of those gray areas of like, is it a dagger, is it a sword? It can kind of be in either category, but it's definitely not a two-handed sword. And that has a bit of a flame blade effect to it as well. So I think if you wanted to, it probably wouldn't be like incorrect necessarily to describe it as a flame blade, but people just don't, because it's from different sides of the world there. European swords, and then over towards India. I do not have Anduril, no. That's not it. I'm realizing how far behind the chat I am. I'm working my way through this. I might have to. How far gone am I? Oh, dearie me! I just scrolled the chat. I'm going to try to be quicker about this. Is there a weird? Let's see. Is there a weird spot between? Okay, is there a weird spot between being effective in a sport between being historically accurate? Yes, there is a bit of a weird spot between being historically accurate and a martial. Let's see. Sorry, my things are happening. Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to think of. So in a sporting capacity, you can get away with certain risky plays that are just probably too risky to try. Depending on the rule set, there are things that you could do where you could. Oftentimes, you're scoring to the touch, and if you're doing a rule set that has like lights out rules, throwing everything to the caution to the wind to land that thrust to the face. With no regard for where their sword is, because you have a lights out rule set, could work in your favor, when in reality, there's no guarantee that you would have successfully, like even if you hit them in the face with the thrust, that's no guarantee that the thrust actually would have gone in and done anything that would stop them. The skull's pretty good at its job. There's a lot of hard deflective bones around here, cheekbones in particular. You can, your face is structured to protect a lot of your soft stuff. So there's a very real chance that even if you threw a thrust at a face, it might catch a bone and skid and shoot off. So that's certainly a possibility. So gambling everything on that one shot, not to say it wasn't done historically, but that definitely does have it. It's one of those things that you'd be cautioned away from, because it's too much of a gamble. What's your favorite stance with each of your weapons? I don't like super duper have favorite stances. I switch between them, so I can only ever speak like aesthetically. And speaking aesthetically, I really love like a high Vomtog over the head. I think that is always like really impressive looking. Let's see what else. Honestly, I guess that is my favorite one, aesthetically speaking. I do like a good like hanging point sort of position as well. All right, so I'm gonna try to get a move on here with some of these. Least favorite sword? I don't know. I get asked this a few times, and every now and then I can't remember. But I feel like my least favorite sword would be when can I say Gladius? Because I get so sick of hearing about it. It's a lot of people's favorite swords, and I don't dislike it on its own merits. It does nothing for me. But the fact that everybody seems to talk about the Gladius so much, it kind of drives me batty. Because I think people overfixate on the Gladius. You see, I'm going on a tangent. I think people overfixate on the Gladius because they think it's like a really good sword, but like they look at it in isolation, and they think like the success of the Roman Empire and everything as being somehow tied up in the Gladius itself, when it's really a part of a cohesive system. And the Gladius itself, I just don't find it that remarkable. In it, like it works really well as a system with the scutum, and then the a legionary formation and everything. I think all those pieces work together really well, but individually they're all a little unimpressive in their own ways. But that's fine. They can be. They're a unit. Does the armor weigh a lot? It weighs about 60 pounds. You're doing a historically accurate version of Dark Souls. What do I think is the worst about games of this genre? See, I think the some of the worst, like if you're trying to be like authentic, I think some of the worst offenses are like so intrinsic to why the genre works that you can't really separate them. Those like gigantic, huge swings are really important from a gameplay perspective, but they don't look great from a historical perspective. And I don't. But it's hard to separate those two. How often will I say I practice in armor compared to practicing without? A lot. 95% of my time is out of armor, I would say, if not more. Honestly, it's probably closer to like 98. Like putting on that armor is a whole deal. Whereas my fencing gear is just a jacket, mask, gloves. It takes so much less time to put on, so much less work goes into it, so much easier to transport. It doesn't weigh 60 pounds. So I don't get a lot of mileage out of that thing at times. Can you beat people with the bottom of the sword? Absolutely. What is company I buy swords? I buy swords from all sorts of companies, so I can't really give you a singular one. Can knights drop kick? I've seen them do cartwheels, so I would imagine they can do drop kicks too. Do knights always wear their armor? No. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Knights do karate. I mean, I guess if they found somebody who knew how to do karate and someone showed them how to do karate, then sure. I could switch to PC. I guess I could switch to PC and go live that way, but my PC's over there. I don't have a webcam on it. It's the whole thing. Then again, I have streamed on it. I don't know what I'm saying. I've got a thing that looks details. Too much work. I'm lazy. That's the answer. Short sword, long sword. I like long swords, but I'm coming around on short swords. Like I will always love the look of big swords, but when you are wearing swords at a Renaissance festival, you start to appreciate the smaller swords. I believe I'd probably gravitate towards a smaller sword if I were wearing one daily. I totally understand why someone would want to wear a sword like this, even if it gets majorly outsized, even by just a long sword like this. I mean, that is this sword is so tiny compared to this one, but I would much rather wear this one. Way less fuss to wear one of these. Thank you, Jesper. Can we talk about the messer? If I can get to it. That's a very open-ended question. I'm trying to catch up with comments here. I'm sure somebody else will ask a specific thing about the messer that will get me running on a tangent. So I'm going to see if we can get to one of those. What tournaments will we see you at next year? I always attend the Raleigh Open and then Queen's Gambit, and anything else is up in the air. It just depends on if I make it out to it. Do I think investing in durable handguards is a good idea? I would suppose so, yes. I'm not quite sure. Did knights use muskets? Depending on how we want to define that, yes. Ish. there's this really cool sweet spot in history where you have men, heavy cavalry, not necessarily not necessarily composed entirely of knights or even that much nobility in that period, but you will have this sweet spot where you have people armored like the quintessential knight, but they're packing guns, not using muskets, but they've just got like a brace of pistols and they're going like bang bang, and it's great. But there's like, you think a bunch of knights charging you down with lances is scary. Just wait until they all have pistols. In my opinion, what's the best weapon to pair with a shield, specifically a buckler? I mean, honestly, I think just a sword is, especially like a side sword like this. I think this is just like one of the best companions to a buckler you could have. This thing is, these things work so well together. Let's see, what forge is this Vihander from? It is from Regenier Armory. Do swords and armor make adequate soundproofing panels? Huh. I don't know. I use a little clip-on mic, so it doesn't really pick up much outside of me. I would say that, when did knights stop using plate armor? I would say, martially speaking, the plate armor outlasted the knights. I'd say knights as a martial institution went away before the armor did. What was the code of chivalry? Complicated and varied and hard to pin down. It's a code of conduct, more invested in like corralling the belligerents of the knights rather than lofty romantic ideals. That kind of stuff sort of gets like pushed, like it comes in later and then gets like backdated. But ultimately, it's more about a rules of engagement, that kind of stuff. What do I say the most protective style of armor is? There's some like really impressive stuff. Like King Henry, Henry VIII had some like fully encompassing armor. It had no mail. It was like entirely articulated plates. That stuff's going to keep you real safe, but it has other issues, namely being entirely encased in metal. It has its own problems. Are spears better than a long axe? Depends on what you're trying to do, I guess. I would probably, given the choice between the two, I would probably take the spear. So behind me is a 1717 French musket. It is functional. Did I need a license to own my weapons? No. Is the muzzle loader real? Yes, the 1717 French musket is real. What is survivorship bias? Survivorship bias is basically, let's say you have 100 swords made, 80 infantry, like 80 swords made for your rank and file infantry, 20 swords made for the nobility. Over time, pretty much every single one of those infantry swords has been lost. And then let's say, like maybe 10 or even 5 of the nobility's swords have remained, and they were really nice swords. So survivorship bias, if you look at like, hey, we have these 5 swords and they're really cool, it's clearly because we have 5 of them, that gives us a basis to say that this is the standard to which all swords were made, ignoring the fact that all those swords that got used up by the infantry, poof. So that's kind of how survivorship bias works. So you have to always be careful and think about, why did this particular piece survive, and not letting its survivorship influence. So you will always, you always have more survivors of the nobility's stuff, because they tend to make, they're not just functional pieces, they are art pieces. Art and function together. They're not utilitarian. So all the utilitarian stuff got used up and discarded or recycled, and etc. And so that stuff is gone. So it's really easy to fall prey to survivorship bias and let that tailor your opinion of what existed. What do I think is the most superior sword style for actual modern combat? A machete. It's got utility in droves, and they're still used. You know, there are armies out there that still issue machetes, not necessarily with the expectation of them getting that much fighting in with them, but it's a very useful design that has lasted and still gets used in like civilian fighting too, depending on where in the world you are. Oh, I finally got to Big Guy Gabe. Oh, thank you for the donation, Big Guy Gabe. I saw that you had donated that, and I was like, I'm sure I'm going to get to this comment here eventually, so I can try to answer any question he gave me. And then you didn't give me a question at all. Thank you. Frank Knox asked, "Where did I get the Montante?" Regaining Armory. Are you the same person who had asked it the other 2 times? Let me just. Nobody. I haven't actually shown it in a minute since everybody keeps asking. I keep getting questions about this, and now I've gotten tipped $5 to answer. Where did I get this Montante? This is from Regaining Armory, and I will wave it around for a bit because here you go, getting your $5 worth of Montante examination. So this one is the Montante, the Regaining Montante number 4. I custom ordered this with a shorter handle. I measured it out to basically being my shoulder width, which is kind of a good biomechanical shorthand for how long you want your handles on a sword like this. So mine's had a shortened handle, but yeah, it's a big sword, big sword. How about that? Oh, I'm gonna hit a wall. How about that wrist strength though, right? Ooh. Someone was asking earlier about wrist strength, and yeah, that's kind of a useful thing to have. But don't you worry, if you do fencing, it'll happen. Wrist strength and finger strength, helpful. Have I done any martial arts besides HEMA? I did Taekwondo back in the day. What was the great helm used with? Mail. Mail is a great armor in and of itself. Opinions on Kvetten. I have been interested in getting a Kvetten sword. I've heard good things about them, but I've not had the opportunity to try one out. And I've even said them. I was like, hey, Kvetten, I hear good things about your swords, but I don't know anything about them. But I've never heard back from them. My club has an order coming in of a bunch of Kvetten swords, though, so I might play around with some of them. Yeah, I know Matt Easton partnered up with them to do that Easton Saber. That thing's, I'd love to try one out. Have I ever reviewed Pirates of the Caribbean swords? No, I suppose I could. Do I have a favorite medieval battle? No. It's one of those weird things where it's like arms and armor. I mean, they're involved in the killing of people, and yet they're fascinating to talk about. But for some reason, for me, like picking a favorite battle to me is kind of like picking my favorite time where people died in mass, and it's a weird, like, you see what I mean? Like, it feels hypocritical to be like interested in the swords and stuff, then find picking a favorite battle weird. I don't know. I suppose the difference being the potential of and the actual having done of is the distinction there. But we have more guests coming over. Indeed. Okay. So we have surprise guests coming over. Okay. I'm going to try to very quickly because somebody donated something. Apologies. I'm going to try to run through this really quickly. How much time does it take to kit up a suit of full armor? It takes me about 20 minutes. Have a family crest? No. I mean, yes, but I don't. Like, yes, I have a family crest, but I don't use it. Good newbie advice. My number one good my two good newbie advices. Don't break your wrist. So don't break your wrist. So this, my wrist is nice and straight. My wrist is broken. See the difference? So this is good. This is nice. This is healthy. This is strong. This will hurt eventually. Don't do it. Similarly, don't misalign. I can't really show it well, but make sure that your toe and your knee are going the same way. Don't let your toe and knee go different ways. That's also going to hurt you eventually. How exactly did spears provide protection from certain attacks, such as to the hand when you don't have a hand guard? Part of it is length. So you are setting things aside further out. Here. So if let's say this is my hand here. So with a sword, you've got like maybe like that much length. So things are happening much closer to your hand. But with a pole arm, you have all this length. So you can make those interactions happen out here and deal with them. And through the factor of length, you can make those engagements happen before it ever actually gets close enough to hit you in the hand. But yes, your hands are exposed. If somebody goes straight for your hand, that is totally a possibility. But the factor of length is, as far as how far out those crossings are happening, is what's keeping you safe, your hand safe most of the time. Again, I'm going to be trying to rush really quick, so if I skip a question, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get caught up before I have to jump. Just trying to hit them like most interesting questions here. How tall does a sword have to be a great sword? A rule of thumb I like is big enough to where you can't draw it from your hip. If it's too big to be drawn, then it's probably a great sword. Although I've seen people like do like challenge things of like odachi, where they will draw an odachi out from their hip, but they always have to do like weird stuff, right? They'll like pull it part way out and then they'll grab it by the sword and then pull it the rest of the way out. I don't think that counts anymore, right? I'm talking about being able to draw it, swoop, right? Being able to go draw. If it's too big to be drawn quickly from your hip, not a. I'd say it's officially a great sword at that point. Do I think attacking the fingers counts as a fatal decommissioned? I would say it counts as decommissioned. If you can't hold the sword, poof. Can you use a scythe as a weapon? Yes, but typically when they are weaponized, they will take the scythe head, take it off, orient it vertically, and then remount it that way, so it becomes a glaive. Do I have any Greco-Roman weapons? Not really. Crossbows, I have a toy one, but just zooming along. My halberd is a GDFB halberd. The polearm behind me is a Depika poleaxe. It's not a particularly like great item, but I think I always like to think that Depika. Don't ever buy a Depika sword; they're not good. But I like to think that it's kind of hard to like mess up an axe. So even a bad axe is still an axe. Okay, how many? Why do medieval soldiers have massive round heads with a helmet on? Do people look like bobbleheads? Because you need space. So the people look like bobbleheads with helmets on because so you have your head, you need space, then you need the helmet, and so it starts to get big very quickly. An issue with a lot of fiction, like especially like For Honor, like games, they tend to like shrink wrap the helmet and it make it super tiny. If you wear a helmet in isolation with the rest of the armor, yeah, you'll look like a bobblehead. You will. Okay, I had another. How much more effective? So I'm trying to hit I need to wrap things up here, so I'm going to try to hit the donor questions real quick. Frank asked, how much more effective would taking point on horseback taking point on horseback be with an S stock instead of a side sword? I'm not quite sure what that question means. Taking point as in taking the lead, or taking point as in thrusting with it? The S stock would be stiffer, be better suited to thrusting into armor. But I think if we're talking about like the force of a horse at play, I think the person on the receiving end, it's not going to make a huge difference to them which they get hit by when we're talking about like on horseback. I think in either case, it's going to be a bad time for them. The weight of the horse, I think, is going to be a far more significant factor than the blade profiles of either. But as a general rule, the S stock is going to be better at thrusting with its stiff blade into gaps and breaking the mail, whereas the side sword might start to flex. If it starts to hit before it can penetrate, it might start to flex on you. The S stock is less likely to flex and more likely to just keep driving. Okay, so that caught me up with everything. What time is it? It's almost been an hour. So I apologize to anybody I skipped over to get to this point right now. I am going to let the chat run live now. I'm going to try to let it run until I hit the hour mark, which is going to be in like 3 more minutes. So if I skipped your question and you're still here and you really want to get it answered, I'm not going to scroll back up again. I'm just going to leave it here. I'm going to let it run for the next 4 minutes or whatever. So if you have any dying questions you need answered before I end the stream, fire them off right now. Gladius and Longsword 100. Thanks for all the info and insight tonight. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here. I've been talking to it so long, my throat's dry. So this is probably a good time to stop anyways for me. Oh, hello. Oh boy. Romelanos Lans Demos Articio Ludwig. And then I can't read that part. You are a channel member and you have a little Hans. Yeah, quick shout out to Ludwig over here. If you are a channel member, I don't like to do exclusive content. I don't. I understand, like, I'm fine with people who do. For me, it's always been really important that all of my stuff stays completely accessible to everybody. So I don't like to do exclusive content. So unfortunately, I can't incentivize that with channel membership. So really, like, all I can say is, like, you're supporting the channel. If you join the channel membership, I will post like tidbits about things that are going on. Like, people who were channel members knew about the swords I was getting before I ever got them. But I'll never be able to like offer exclusive video content. But if you want to support the channel, yeah, you will get a cute little Hans icon by your name, and you can use a Hans emoji in the live chat. So that's cool. I said, favorite muzzleloader. Oh, well, I really like the 1717, but I would say like a wheel lock pistol. I really want to get a wheel lock pistol. I said I wasn't going to scroll up, but I spent so long talking about channel membership that I felt like I robbed people of that. Okay, so I'm going to very quickly skim. My favorite flavor of Pringles, sour cream and onion. My favorite video game sword. I don't have one, but my favorite video game spear is the Dragon Slayer spear from Dark Souls. Let me see my equipment, or maybe I have a. I have a katana. Some people maybe would have been fussy about me doing that, but there we go. I did it this way. Yabby. There. Katana. Also by Balor Arms, by the way. I have 3 Balor Arm swords. 1 katana, 1 longsword, 1 Kriegsmesser. What is my favorite fencing manual? I'm so glad you asked. It is Myers 17 or 1570. I was supposed to say 1750. 1570 Kunst des Fechten. It's my favorite one, and I have a reproduction of it. Beautiful. Would I prefer a curved tilt lightsaber or a regular hilt? Or what about a double-bladed lightsaber? I really like having. I would say I think curved tilts are interesting, but I wouldn't personally choose one. Honestly, crossguard lightsaber, the one I've had on the stream on the channel before. I really love that one. That'd be my first choice. It's that crossguard saber. But if I need to have something a little more traditional, I would just take that crossguard saber and then just delete the Quillon emitters, but have the same length, which is like yay long. By the same token, a double, like if I had an actual for realsies lightsaber that I can turn on and off, then yeah, I'd take the double bladed lightsaber and then just usually keep the second blade off. Do I have an opinion on Claymore versus the Gaelic name? I think language is changes, and I think referring to, I think at this point, this sword factor being a Claymore is here to stay, and I think it's a fool's errand to try to change the cultural zeitgeist that this is a Claymore and that a basket hilted Claymore is not. At this point in time, this is a Claymore. The other one's a basket hilted broadsword, and that's how it is. If you want to be like historically accurate, like if you're trying to like write something in setting, then maybe. But I think as far as like language now, they have diverged. That's a Claymore. The other one's a basket hilt broadsword. That's just how it is now, and it's you're fighting upstream to change it. How long have I been into HEMA? About almost 10 years. Want to dress as a long snack? Where should you look? That's complicated. That's a more complicated question than I have time to answer right now. I'm sorry. Would a modern riot shield be better than a shield? That's a good question. I don't know. I would love to pick one up and find out. I know that you won't get the benefits of things getting stuck in it, which can be useful. Like getting things caught in your shield can be useful, and you're not really going to get that with a modern riot shield. But I'd be curious to know which is more durable. I don't really call myself a firearm enthusiast. I got the musket though. I like historical firearms. I don't have any interest in modern firearms. What's the maximum length of a weapon can be on horseback before becoming a problem? Really long, like really long. Well, check out the lances used by the winged hussars. Those things get huge. Long enough, they were long enough that they could outrange some pikes. The sword pin on my suit is exclusive to my fencing club. If you're not part of the club, you can't get one. What do I find the most interesting of Myers' teachings? Ooh. Hmm. I'm gonna have to dwell on that. I'm sorry, Almond, I don't have an answer for you, but you've given me something to think on. What is my favorite of his teachings? Thoughts on a lightsaber and energy shield combo? This is one of those weird things. Like I accept the lightsaber, but for some reason, like energy, if like the energy buckler that the Mandalorians use, I can't stand it. I don't know why. For some reason, I can accept a lightsaber blade. I guess because it feels like it's just like a self-contained like arc or something like it. If a lightsaber blade like makes sense in my head in a way that like a hard light shield doesn't, and so I intrinsically don't like the idea of those. Anyways, I'm gonna wrap it up here. We are now past the hour mark, so thank you all for joining me, and I hope you all have a great night. A huge thanks to everybody who donated to this stream. Um, all of the proceeds from my YouTube channel go back into the channel. I don't keep any of it for like my personal use. It is all invested back into this stuff. So huge thanks to everybody who donated. That money will be going towards more acquisitions for you all. I reinvest it back into you. Good night.